Hey guys, tonight we're gliding into a tale, as strange as it is softly lit one, that floats gently through the cool shadows of ancient Sparta, where not even the gods could resist a moonlit bath and a little light animal impersonation. You're lying still now, perhaps a fan hums in the background, and just beyond the edges of your thoughts, you begin to imagine still water, distant reeds, and a very out-of-place goose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Over there, I love seeing our sleepy little map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late evening in ancient Sparta. The sky is soft, with fading twilight, and the air hums with stillness. Just beyond the palace walls, past the fragrant gardens and statues wrapped in ivy, a narrow river twists quietly through the trees. Fireflies drift lazily above its surface, and somewhere out over the water, something moves, something smooth, white, and gliding. You watch, maybe from the shaded bank, maybe from somewhere up in the branches of a cypress tree your imagination has generously supplied. A lone goose graceful cuts across the surface like a figure skater. It doesn't honk, it doesn't flap, it just moves, in perfect silence, as if it's not really a goose at all. Spoiler, it's not. This is Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, enthusiastic practitioner of questionable romantic tactics, and for reasons we will gently explore together, he has chosen on this peaceful Spartan night to become a goose. Yes, a goose. Now, if you're thinking, was this really the best idea he had? You're not alone. Historians, classicists, and exasperated high school literature teachers have been asking the same thing for centuries. But the myths don't come with footnotes. They just give us a glowing riverbank, a royal woman named Leda, and one exceptionally committed bird. The grass along the water's edge sways just a little, not from wind, but from movement of figure approaching. Queen Leda draped in linen, hair braided back, a silver pin tucked at the base of her neck. She steps out into the night with the wary elegance of someone whose day has been far too full of ceremonial garlands and awkward feasts. She walks slowly, barefoot, down to the river. She's done this before when the palace noise gets to be too much, when her royal duties weigh heavier than her crown. Tonight, she just wants to feel the water again, to sink into something cool and ancient. As she wades in, that not quite goose shifts its path, gliding closer. The moon overhead brightens, perhaps a touch too theatrically. Its reflection dances across the water in ripples. Leda closes her eyes. She doesn't notice the goose, not yet. She's half lost in thoughts of tomorrow's ceremonies, of royal guests and diplomatic dinners. Maybe she sighs, maybe she hums. And a goose. He's calculating his entrance. Now let's just pause here, because there's something both ridiculous and quietly unsettling about imagining a thunder-hurling deity shapeshifting into waterfowl just to woo someone. But this is Greek myth, and subtlety isn't really its genre. Still, there's an eerie calm to this version. No thunderbolts, no grand announcements, just a strange bird, a quiet bath, and the heavy silence of divine plans. Leda opens her eyes. The goose is right there, floating beside her. She stares. It stares. Neither moves. And somewhere up on Mount Olympus, at least one other god is definitely face-palming. Some versions of the myth tell us that Zeus approached her gently, nuzzled close, shivering as if winded. Act, of course, meant to inspire sympathy. Other versions skip the theatrics and lean straight into weird divine romance territory. Either way, Leda, mortal, queen, mother of future myths, encounters the goose, and the rest is ... cloudy. The myth doesn't go into graphic detail, thankfully. What we do know is this. The next morning, Leda is found with 2 large eggs, just sitting there, as if the gods themselves had left an awkward brunch offering. Inside, 4 children, 2 of them divine, 2 of them mortal, twins, but not twins. The myth is a nesting doll of confusion. One of those children, by the way, will grow up to be Helen of Troy. Yes, that Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships, born from an egg, from a goose, from a god. You might be wondering, how seriously did the ancient Greeks take this? Seriously enough to carve it into marble, paint it on vases, and whisper about it at night when the kids were asleep. This wasn't just a myth. It was bedtime theology. And apparently, it was important enough that artists throughout history kept returning to it, feathers and all. So here we are. The river flows on. Leda sleeps, somewhere, under linen sheets embroidered with laurel leaves. And Zeus, well, he probably flew off somewhere smugly, leaving just a few white feathers behind. No note, no apology. Just divine mischief in waterfowl form. And that, is how this peculiar myth begins. The sun has long since slipped behind the hills of Laconia, but the water remembers the warmth. You imagine yourself there again by the same soft-edged river, dew-dappled reeds, swaying gently. The scene hasn't changed, but time has shifted. Maybe an hour has passed, maybe more. And yet, in myth, time is less a ticking clock, and more a silken curtain brushed aside, whenever a god decides the story should move along. Leda lies awake now, back in the royal chamber. Sleep, the most loyal servant, won't come. Perhaps she blames the summer heat, the strange fatigue in her limbs, or maybe even the eerie calm of the water. But mostly, she feels watched. Not in the frightening sense there are guards, of course, but in the sense that something larger than her life has noticed her. Not her husband, King Tyndareus, not the Spartan court. Something else. You lie beside her in this imagined moment, not intruding, just listening to the stillness. Her chamber smells of laurel oil and new linen. A single lamp flickers by the wall, its flame bending slightly, as if something invisible has just passed. She sighs, and beneath that sigh, somewhere deeper, is the weight of something unnatural. A memory of smooth feathers, of golden eyes set in a head that should have been small and ordinary but wasn't. This is the part of myth they don't carve into statues. The aftermath, the quiet reckoning. Outside, the river glimmers, the reeds gossip softly in the breeze, and the Goose, already back in the heavens, is nowhere to be found. Not a feather left, not even a ripple. And here's where it gets stranger, because the next morning, as the first sunbeam finds her chamber and slides across the tiled floor, Leda doesn't rise to courtly duties or ceremonial breakfasts. She wakes beside an egg, a large one, pale as ivory, smooth as polished marble. Just one. At first, she stares at it. Now, if you or I woke to find an unexplained egg on the bed, we'd probably call for someone, anyone. But Leda, she just breathes, calm, distant, as if part of her already knows. And by the time the second egg appears, she doesn't even flinch. Here's the bizarre biology of Greek mythology. Gods don't always follow rules. Mortal women can give birth to gods, and gods can apparently do so via avian disguise, and the world's most awkward breakfast metaphor. Eventually, these eggs will hatch into for children. Helen, Clytemnestra, Castor, and Pollux. Half mortal, half divine. Their destinies already written like names on parchment soaked in olive oil. And while the myths disagree on which twin belonged to which father, one thing is clear. They are not ordinary. But back to this morning. The servants arrive with their usual rustling and soft chatter. They bring trays of cheese, bread, watered wine. They pause. They stare at the eggs. They freeze. You imagine the silence awkward, brittle, hanging in the air like steam. Then Leda speaks, simply, calmly. Something like, "Bring the priestesses." Because when you're a queen in a world of prophecy and temple offerings, unexplained, eggs don't mean panic. They mean portent. Maybe a blessing. Maybe a very, very weird divine joke. And now the court buzzes. The egg rumor spreads faster than Dionysus. At a vineyard, priests inspect. Philosophers guess. One very anxious cook probably swears he didn't leave anything strange in the pantry. And in Olympus, Zeus is pleased. Probably reclining on his celestial sofa, grapes in hand, watching it all like an elaborate soap opera. Hera, his long-suffering wife, almost certainly notices and almost certainly rolls her eyes so hard it echoes. Because here's the thing. This wasn't Zeus' first shape-shifted escapade, or his weirdest. Historians and frustrated ancient playwrights still debate which animal forms he took and how many times he pulled this trick. Was he a swan when he wooed Leda, or a goose? The vase painters couldn't seem to decide. Swan, goosey galat. This point, it's more a question of artistic flair than zoological accuracy. Even scholars today wrestle with the details. Historians still argue whether Leda's tale is separate from another, involving Nemesis. You hear whispered in dusty academic corners. Some suggest the two myths merged over time, creating one grand egg-laying romantic enigma. But to Leda, none of that matters. She watches the eggs, silent, thoughtful, maybe even resigned. You lie with her in the quiet, not needing answers, just feeling the softness of the linen, the subtle breeze drifting through the window, the knowledge that something sacred, something mythicast passed through this room. And outside, the river flows on. Still, patient. Time passes. The eggs, large and impossibly perfect, don't crack right away. They sit in Leda's chamber, tucked in silken cloth and cedar-lined baskets, guarded more fiercely than any crown jewel. It's the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath soft but loaded with anticipation. You imagine being there, nearby, listening to the soft creaks of palace life, the distant hum of bees in a sunlit courtyard, and the occasional shifting of linen as Leda gently checks the eggs, not quite knowing what she hopes or fears to find. Then one morning, the first egg moves, just a shiver, like a ripple on a still pond. You feel it before you see it. The moment your eyes adjust, there's a tiny crack, the smallest line, and suddenly, the world feels more alert, like even the columns and curtains are waiting. Within hours, the eggs hatched out. Now, here's where myth dives headfirst into mystery. The first egg gives birth to Helen. Yes, that Helen, future queen of Sparta. Face dash that dash, launch dash, a dash thousand dash ships. Helen, she arrives, not screaming, but quiet, watchful, golden-skinned, strange-eyed, the kind of infant who makes people bow without knowing why. The second egg reveals twins Castor and Pollux, locked in a peaceful tangle of limbs and matching curls. The two boys are almost identical, though one, it's said, will bleed and die like a man, while the other will not. The final child, born from either another egg, or perhaps the folds of myth itself, is Clytemnestra, destined for tragedy, for knives and kings and stories told in whispers. 4 children, each bound by feathers and fate. Their birth sends waves through Sparta. The court is ablaze with omens, with scrolls unfurled and incense burned thick enough to turn ceilings gold. The high priestess declares them sacred, divine-touched, and possibly dangerous. And Leda, she simply holds them. She cradles Helen with a mixture of awe and dread, strokes Clytemnestra's hair while whispering lullabies passed down through generations of wary queens, and watches Castor and Pollux sleep nose to nose, utterly unaware that someday they'll share not just a crib, but immortality. It's hard not to wonder what it felt like to mother children who defy logic, to hold proof of a god's intrusion in your arms. You imagine Leda rocking gently in a wooden chair, the kind that creaks faintly over stone floors. Outside, the fig trees rustle. Somewhere, a lute plays a sleepy tune in the gardens. The babies breathe softly, tangled in linens embroidered with golden leaves. And over time, the divine origin of these children becomes myth's worst-kept secret. Every guest that passes through Sparta's halls whispers theories. Was it really Zeus? Why eggs? Were the children fully mortal or something? In between, you can almost hear the court gossip in the background, dripping with olive oil-slick curiosity. She says they just appeared, but have you seen Helen's eyes? I heard a goose flew in and wouldn't leave her window. No one normal has twins, and a girl from an egg, for the god's sake. Historians still argue whether Helen and her brothers were meant to be literal hatchlings or symbols. Some scholars believe the eggs were metaphors representing rebirth, the fragility of divine power, or even a cultural echo of older, pre-Olympian myths. Others insist the Greeks believed it all, quite literally. After all, these were the same people who thought gods turned into bulls, golden rain, and columns of fire. And the eggs, those delicate, otherworldly vessels, are never seen again. Some stories say they were offered to a temple. Others claim they vanished as mysteriously as they arrived. Perhaps Hera snatched them in a fit of divine jealousy, or maybe they simply crumbled into dust the moment their purpose was fulfilled. In your mind's eye, you picture the cradle room. Sunlight filters through latticework, casting soft lines across polished stone. A breeze stirs the sheer curtains. Helen, tiny and regal, stares at a hanging silver charm above her. Clytemnestra sucks her thumb. Castor and Pollux nap, already dreaming of horses and stars. Leda watches them, quiet, tired, but proud. Somewhere, Zeus watches too, from Olympus, from the clouds, from the smug corners of every statue ever made in his honor. But he does not visit again. Not in this form. Not like before. And thus, the household settles into a strange rhythm. One where myths coo softly in cribs, where prophecy naps beside mortality, where the smell of lavender oil mixes with the dizzying weight of divine consequence. The palace resumes its duties. Dignitaries come and go. Markets reopen. The chickens cluck. But the story of Leda and the eggs remains half-whispered, half-believed, always present. A bedtime tale told to Spartan children, who giggle or shiver, depending on the telling. And outside, once more, the river flows. Still, dreamlike, unbothered. Castor and Pollux grow quickly as children of myth tend to do. One day, they're tiny, swaddled in linen and silence. The next, they're racing through palace courtyards, bare feet slapping stone, laughing in a rhythm only twins understand. You watch them from a shaded corner. They blur together like reflections in water, similar enough to confuse even their mother at times, yet different in the softest ways. Castor favors horses, Pollux the arts. But what ties them isn't preference, it's love. They are inseparable. Not like normal siblings, who argue over honeycakes and wooden toys. These two move like halves of one soul. Where Castor reaches, Pollux steadies. Where Pollux hesitates, Castor dares. When one is scolded, the other stands beside him, without question whether guilty or not. You picture them sneaking into the stables at dusk, fireflies blinking lazily around them, whispering dreams about riding north beyond the hills, where mountains kiss the sky and stars feel close enough to touch. It's childlike and epic at once, the kind of conversation that happens only between siblings who believe the world is theirs. But there's something unusual about them. A quiet, lingering shimmer. Pollux never bruises. Not truly. He falls. He scrapes. But the next morning, his skin is clear. A divine trickle runs through his veins. Something no human wound can linger in. Castor, on the other hand, bleeds. He flinches when he cuts his palm on a bramble. He aches after a fall. Mortal, entirely. And yet they stay close. They train with the same tutors, learn the same dances, fight with the same wooden swords under the same golden sun. Later tales will call them the Dioscuri, the sons of Zeus. But in these earlier days, they're just boys. Barefoot boys with scraped knees, olive-oiled curls, and a shared laugh that carries across marble halls. Their bond becomes the stuff of whispered legend, not because they are loud or cruel or wildly ambitious, but because they are good, loyal, kind to animals, quick to share figs. The sort of boys palace servants speak of fondly, long after they've grown. Those twins, they say while kneading bread or sweeping the baths, never saw them apart, not once. Now, not every version of their myth agrees on the details. Some claim both were born of Zeus. Others insist only Pollux carried divinity. Still others argue both were mortal, just touched by fate. Historians still argue whether this divide was a literary accident, or a deeply intentional contrast to boys. One foot in the world of gods, the other stuck in the mud of humanity. Their adventures begin modestly. A boar hunt in the nearby woods, a chariot race down the valley path. But word of their bond, their beauty, and their growing strength spreads like slow smoke through the Greek world. One by one, their names slip into scrolls, into temple songs, into the half-true stories told. By firelight, the Dioscuri become symbols, not just of courage, but of what siblinghood could mean if purified of rivalry and pride. But the part that never fades from any version of the tale, the bit people cling to like a lullaby, is what happens when Castor dies. It's not unexpected. He's mortal. The body breaks. Maybe in battle, maybe on a reckless ride. The myths vary. But Pollux's grief is constant across every telling. He does not eat. He does not sleep. He carries his brother's sword. He won't leave the tomb. You picture him kneeling in the temple courtyard, twilight pooling behind the columns, murmuring to the sky. Not in anger but in longing. He begs Zeus' father, sometimes stranger for a trade. Let Castor live. Take half my immortality. What use is forever? He argues. If you're not here, and the gods, for once, listen. Zeus grants a compromise. They will share life and death, alternating days in Olympus and the underworld, never fully apart, never entirely together. Half the time glowing in the heavens, half the time sinking into the shadows. It's not exactly fair, but it's divine, and so the stars gain new residents. The Gemini constellation, two bright points, always close, never one outshining the other. Sailors whisper their names before voyages. Farmers point to them as signs of the seasons shifting. But you just remember the boys, running side by side through halls of gold, sneaking figs from the kitchens, falling asleep with their backs touching. Not yet gods, not yet myths. Just two brothers trying to stay close, in a world that always pulls us apart.